Hello again, welcome to the next 6 months is me, Peter Cox, together with Mark Thomas, author of 99%, business strategist, general guru, all around good guy actually. I've been looking at the news today, Mark, and that organ of economists, The Economists, is out with a rather surprising front cover. Let's take a look at it. The Tories plan to remake the state. And here's a quote from it. Brexit, which is what we're suffering at the moment, is the boldest step, says The Economist, but it's only the first. The Tory plan is to unchain the executive by limiting judicial power, pushing back against devolution, and reforming the civil service. Both the reformers' arguments, says The Economist, and the direction of travel are wrong. This is very forthright language, Mark, and it's rather disturbing, actually. If this were in any other context, it'd be sort of conspiracy theory stuff, it'd be Alex Jones stuff, nobody would give it the time of day. This is on the front cover of The Economist. What's going on?
Well, I agree with you. It is surprising because The Economist is a slightly right-wing organ, and it is very surprising that it would be, as you put it, so forthright. They've said it very clearly and I think very accurately. Brexit is a huge step, but it's only the first step in this plan. And I absolutely agree with them that both the arguments for doing what they want to do and the direction of travel are wrong. And I have to say I was astonished but very, very pleased to see that they had that front cover, because some of these things, as you know, I had written about in the book. Yeah. And at the time, some people said, well, nobody really thinks like that. And now a very, very mainstream, very conservative, with a small c, newspaper has come out and said, no, this is exactly what's happening. And it's very big and it's very important.
I don't recall anybody mentioning this in the election when they got such a thumping majority. I mean, the election was all about Brexit, but it looks like it's not just about Brexit at all. There's a whole sort of order of other things that we've voted for and are going to get inflicted on us. Can you run through exactly what you think is going to happen?
Well, I think, as does The Economist, apparently, that the Tory Party, which has traditionally been a broad church, which had some extremists for a long, long time, but it had a large body of one nation Tories, has essentially been captured by market fundamentalists, people who have that philosophy that we talked about in one of our earlier discussions, which says the markets are right. If you're rich, that's because you have enormous merit and you deserve to be rich. And if you're poor, that's because you've got very little merit. And I'm sorry if that means you can't afford to feed your children or heat your house. But, you should have thought of that before you had the children, or you should have educated yourself better. That's the philosophy. It's a market fundamentalist philosophy, which says the market is essentially never wrong. Incentives matter. So for rich people, you really need to incentivize them by making sure they have more money. And for poor people, you need to stop them being so comfortable so that they don't just live on benefits as a lifestyle choice. Do you remember that phrase?
I do. I also remember a phrase from the 80s, I think, about back to Victorian values, and it sounds a bit like that.
Well, it is very much back to Victorian values. You think about the level of poverty in Victorian England, and it was shocking. And there is a danger, if we have Victorian values, that we will also see Victorian outcomes. And that, I think, is fundamentally why The Economist is saying both the arguments and the direction of travel are wrong. So you recall that I talked about mass impoverishment before, the fact that most people in this country are poorer now than they were 13 years ago. Well, that's part of this direction of travel, but that will be, the danger is that could be accelerated dramatically if the current cabinet do what I believe they're trying to do and what obviously The Economist believes they're trying to do.
Okay. So It feels incredibly dangerous and incredibly scary, and it feels to me as if there's going to be a huge amount of self-inflicted pain. The problem is at the moment that no one's really been consulted about this. I guess they'd say you've given us an 80-seat majority, so we can do what we want. There's a shade of Dominic Cummings here as well. I actually have to say that the chap we were talking about a day or two ago, who's now departed, but his policies still seem to be with us, don't they?
Well, absolutely. I've always felt that Brexit was a big step in a larger plan. There are not. Even if you're a fund manager, we talked about this the other day, you can make a bit of a killing in the short term, but if you just do Brexit, but then try to run Britain in the way it's been run, it doesn't really make sense, even for a hedge fund manager. It certainly doesn't make sense for any other business. Therefore, why would anybody do it? I think the reason they're doing it is, as The Economist is saying, that it enables a shake-up and a reordering of British society. It enables basically a dismantling of the post-war social contract. And that's the game, I think, the end game that some of these people are heading for.
Another thing that's been announced past day or two is a huge, great investment. I don't know if that's the right word. A huge, great spending on the UK military armed services, new contracts for defence contractors and stuff like that. At the same time, I don't see any inward investment into libraries. I keep on going on about libraries. National Health Service, basic things that we expect in a civilised society. Again, Mark, give us a perspective on that, please. What's going on?
Well, two things are going on. The first one is that a very, very clever piece of messaging is going on, which is simultaneously able to celebrate record investments in X, Y, and Z, and at the same time, literally at the same time, assure us that there's no money, for example, to give nurses a pay rise.
This is bizarre. This is quite odd, actually. Yeah, I've noticed that myself. So how can they find? I can't remember exactly how many billions it is for the military, but it's a huge amount, and I'm not really aware that we're under direct threat from, I don't know, Bosnia or Afghanistan or something like that. And at the same time, there is no money, as you say, for basic services like nurses and so on. How can they justify that?
Well, they justify it by talking out of two sides of their mouth. So one side focuses on our proud military past, and you will have seen Union Jacks accompanying the
absolutely
announcement about the military spending. And at the other side, they keep using this sort of household analogy. Every housewife knows you can't go on living beyond your means. There's no money left in the treasury. Now, serious economists say that's not just wrong, it's actually meaningless. How can there be no money left in the Treasury? The Treasury has, in effect, the ability to create money in unlimited quantities. There can be a shortage of real things. You know, they can't print trees, they can't print cars, they can't print houses, but they can print money. So the idea that there's no money it's not even wrong. It's just utterly ludicrous. But of course, because for a normal person, unfortunately, I don't have a printing press in my basement. In fact, I don't even have a basement. But if I had one, it wouldn't have a printing press in. And that constrains what I can do. And that's the same for every other household in the country. We're constrained because we don't have a printing press. If we had a printing press, we would, of course, spend to fix the roof. We would spend on our children's education. We would spend on healthcare. We would spend on all those things, because why would we not spend? So the government absolutely has the power, and we've seen it dramatically over the last 10 years. By the end of this year, the Bank of England will have created almost £1 trillion, which is equivalent to about half of our current total debt. They will have created that out of nothing by quantitative easing.
Okay. Isn't that
So
isn't that very inflationary, like that policy?
Well, they've been doing it since 2009, I think. And I don't know if you've noticed what's been happening to inflation, but
nothing.
It hasn't. Exactly. So people have been screaming about how inflationary it would be. But the thing is that money is actually a small part of the total amount of money. A lot of money gets created by bank lending.
Yeah.
That's a little bit of a complex subject, but the vast bulk of our money gets created by commercial banks giving out loans. And if people are not able to take loans, or banks are unwilling to give loans, big part of the money supply isn't increasing, and so there's no inflationary pressure from the government creating a bit more. And, you don't actually need a theory for that. You just look at what's been happening to inflation while they've been doing it. And it's not just in the UK. Inflation is a problem in very few countries in the world, and really only countries which have mismanaged to an extraordinary degree. Right at the moment, most businesses are not operating at capacity and will be forced to raise their prices if demand goes up. They're operating well below capacity. Almost every business person I speak to says, well, sales are not where I would like them to be.
No, not at all.
That doesn't sound like an economy that's straining at the limits of capacity and about to unleash a wave of inflation.
Yeah.
So, coming back to this thing, how can it be simultaneously possible that they can afford trillions in total, they can afford tens of billions for the military, but they can't afford to pay the nurses? The simple answer is it can't be true.
Okay. It's social engineering. It's social and political engineering. Our society and our very politics are being shaped into something that somebody else has decided is good for us. We haven't had a hand in. I tell you one thing that really worries me about
I don't think they have decided it's good for us. I just think they don't think that we're important enough to worry about whether it's good for us.
No, that's right. We're the little people. One of the things, something's really disturbing about this is actually limiting judicial power. I mean, I seem to remember, correct me if I'm wrong, I seem to remember one of the reasons that people voted for Brexit was that there was this weird court a long way away in Brussels that we're all subject to, no appeal, completely undemocratic, and that's not British at all. And now the present regime in the UK appears to be moving even further down that path. Am I right?
Well, I think you are right. It's a different argument, because what they were claiming was that the EU had enormous power that couldn't be challenged.
Yes.
What they are creating is an executive, in the words that The Economist used, which cannot be challenged. They've made it very hard to be challenged in Parliament. They have threatened to swamp the House of Lords with what they call Brexit heroes, which would mean they couldn't be challenged in the House of Lords. They want to limit judicial review. They have made all sorts of menacing noises to the BBC to try to make sure that there's no scrutiny that comes from the BBC. Much of the media is already owned by market fundamentalists.
Yeah, we had a look at that the other day.
Which we saw the graph, and it's a pretty scary picture for the UK. Okay. So you think about all the different ways that in a democracy there can be checks and balances, and they're all under threat right now, which is what The Economist was pointing out in that article.
Okay, that's great. It's not great, actually. That's great, Mark. It's not great. Well, it's awful.
I'll tell you what is great about it, though. What's great is that this has been sort of brewing. This is a plot which has been, or as the Economist calls it, a plan which has been hatching for many years, and until very recently, most people wouldn't have believed it. Now, what's good is that a very mainstream organ like The Economist has actually come out and been as explicit as I have, actually, I think, or very nearly as explicit in saying these things. So that makes a big difference, because at the end of the day, we are 99% of the population.
Yes.
99% of the population are 99% of the people. And therefore, if this starts to become mainstream news, people will be aware of it. And if 99% of people don't want it, then it will be stopped. So that's the good news.
Okay, that is good news. I think that's very important to end on something that's positive and empowering, because otherwise we just get really depressed. And if it becomes mainstream news, it becomes mainstream news because you talk to other people about it. That's really the only way. Have a look at Mark's book if you can do, please. It's on Kindle as well as physical and paperback. Leave a comment or a question for Mark here on YouTube right underneath this, and we will see you tomorrow.